your connections to the field.
Sure. Name is Charles White. I am past president of this organization, AECT. I had a total of 34 years when I retired from the Connecticut Department of Education. I was a consultant with the vocational technical schools. And on the day that I had put in to travel to the Arkansas Association for School Media Specialists to address their keynote group, my immediate supervisor denied the travel plans. And I went in and told him that I was considering retirement. I had had my 34 years. I was over the age of 50 and proceeded to give my letter of resignation to commissioner. Went down to Arkansas, did my presentation, came back and told Phil Harris that I was now a full-time presidential member of his board. And he said, okay, I have a couple of suggestions. We have presidents who are asked to travel to various countries to address their group. Would you like to go next month to Beijing, China? My commissioner said that he could not match those travel opportunities. And so for the last 15 years, I've enjoyed the travel, continue to come to the conferences, developed a lot of connections with various presenters over the years here, and have enjoyed my pension and my time from the state. And my classroom experience was of value for the first 15 years that I worked as a television contact for the cable service in Ridgefield High School and Greenwich, Connecticut High School. I've had a good professional, practical experience, especially with the technical schools in Connecticut. When I was first brought in, they were asking, what can we do with computers and technology in our school? So I introduced the first computer programming and business application programs through the Connecticut Department of Ed. So we've had a very good introduction and merger between the school library and the educational technology practitioners right now.
So you saw the strengthening of the Media Center and its evolution from library to Media Center.
Yes, my first job after graduating from Pratt Institute in Brooklyn was with an elementary school. I had a state president in Connecticut, Betty Fast, who asked me to consider coming up for an interview and a contract after going through New York State programs. And she said, I'll take care of your certification. You've had some of the background. We need to get you into the University of Connecticut and get some of the education technology programs from UConn in your background. So I started part-time between Fitch Senior High School in Groton and an elementary school, Mystic. The principal of the school that I first started wanted a male to sit on the floor and read stories to the submarine children whose father was out on 9-month, trials. So I had quite an introduction, a different introduction in my early years. Worked in Greenwich, Connecticut with a very interesting Gold Coast, as they called it, program. My first introduction to computers in the school was at Greenwich. They brought something called an Apple IIe in and used it for contacts with Dartmouth on a career education selection program. And my follow-up was working as their audiovisual contact for the school. Had a principal who moved up to Ridgefield High School and called me and said, we have a cable television set up. We need someone to come in with a technical background. My position will be as an instructor for a communication course at the high school. I worked there 3 years. saw the transition of the library going more into some of the technology applications. My library degree from Pratt was something that really took a transition as changes went, and I was glad for the UConn experiences and education. Had one summer semester where I was invited out to San Jose. Took a course under Jerry Brown. Dr. Brown was an author of one of the textbooks in the field. And I had a University of Connecticut contact who insisted that although I had a very nice course out in San Jose, I needed to retake the course, Carlton Erickson, and his textbook at UConn. So it was an early education experience of seeing changes in West Coast and East Coast. But I was thankful when I got a call from Bob Hale, who was the president of AECT at the time, and he said, "Charlie, I have a position that's coming in that's going to be a state director for the vocational technical schools and bringing them from the 1940s into the 1960s. We're not sure we'll get you into the 80s yet, but at least to make some of those transitions." And I spent 20 years with the 17 vocational technical schools, worked with Bob and his staff up at the department offices. He was the first president of the joint merged organization between the libraries and the Audiovisual Association in the state. And I ended up with some experience on the executive board of the American Association of School Librarians, while he was doing some work with AECT in the development of the national standards, which most recently was called Information Power. So there was a lot of good instructional research background that came through some of the work on publications in the organizations. It was a bitter political fight with some of the editorial issues. The school library profession was very interested in developing their strength of the reading programs and books. And I was coming in with a technology background. Delia Newman was the writer and the editor of much of the work in Information Power. Ed Caffarella was our president of the organization at the time the latest publication standards came out. They were not given the same courtesy that some of the ASL people were in the professional field. They've both stood strong by AECT, and I've spent my last, as I say, close to 40 years now as an attendee at conferences, as someone that's worked closely with the executive directors, and enjoyed, the professional field that's been part of my background. Yep.
So how did you get interested in the field in the first place?
Oh, had to be through the contacts and the mentor of the Professional Association. I came out of Boston College, Arts and Science. Uncle Sam was saying, "We want you. There's an opportunity. You passed your physicals. We'll, consider." When I was up at BC going through Otis Air Force Base and Naval Flight. The profession at that time was, to me, something that I would have gone in as a classroom teacher. I had a director of the public library in Norwalk, Connecticut, who suggested I look into the program at Pratt Institute, which was a combination of school library, computer technology. They were using big old IBM 360s and nothing in the way of the portable computers and laptops that we see today. But I started the program telling the dean, likely that I'm going to be serving over someplace other than in the school district. In November, they passed a lottery. I was on a subway train coming from Manhattan back to Brooklyn. Didn't hear what the numbers were that they were drawing, but I was in the middle of the pack. My mom in Stanford had a letter from Selective Service. Greetings, join us for the eastbound railroad station. I figured my professional career was going to take a different point than coming through the education traditional way. I had a call to the home the next day saying we made a mistake. There are a couple of other people ahead of you, but your number's up in the pack on the lottery that we had, so you'll probably continue your computer education there. And that's what happened. I came with my master's degree, information science from Pratt, and applied for a Connecticut scholarship with the Connecticut School Library Association. At that time became Educational Media Association. And the person who ran the interviews was the state consultant for school libraries, Rita Clark. Rita was my first professional strong contact from ASL side. She had been a president of the School Library Association. And then, as I said, Bob Hale called me once I got a few years under my belt and said, I'd like you to consider coming up to the state. You've served as president of the state association. You've done some of the research on what the schools had to offer at that point in time. And we need someone who's going to come in, take a practical, hands-on approach, make the orders. My first interview with the state included a principal in Hartford, Connecticut, who said, I have a problem. I want to hear what your solution is. I can't order any equipment. I can get all of the 16 millimeter films and materials. I have no projectors and equipment that I can use because of the state funding process. How would you solve that? And I said, well, I'm coming from outside the state budgeting process, but I do know Britannica is a strong affiliate of AECT. I've been to the conferences. I've had representatives call me. If we can put the state on a state buy program for the Britannica films, they will donate equipment to the schools. And he had no other questions to ask me. I suspect that when it came down to innovation and thinking outside of the box and what would you do to get us what we need for the kids and for the teachers and for the program. Some of my experiences down in Greenwich and Ridgefield, knowing who the contacts were in the sales market, probably helped to get me the job that I took for the last 20 years with the state. When it came to federal grants that were coming in, I was the one who had a practical approach to getting the computers in for ESCA money, the federal grants. And so my transition in the early time was to take all the grant money I could get and put in the equipment that was changing the school library, cataloging, the Follett services that were being used as a program. And that was about the same time that the state library was looking at online databases. So we kind of fed in very well with the telecommunication of the state. Like I say, the sad part was when I was given the directive, well, you're not going to go to the state affiliate meetings and you can't represent the national organization. So that was a pivotal point of going home and talking about what I might end up doing without work. My daughters were both coming out of college and they were looking at their own career paths and, Dad, whatever you think you need to do. So house went on the market in Connecticut. I moved down to a retirement condo that we had in Myrtle Beach, and I've been there for over 25 years now. Still travel as much as I can. Missed my first conference in over 40 years last year. They were having a conference meeting in Jacksonville, and I was taking a cruise ship over to Europe and ended up meeting Robert Harrell, who was the president of the association prior to my serving, at a pier in Greece. And we both said, well, we're taking a year off. Came back this year, I understand that I've been nominated for emeritus status with the Foundation Board in AECT. I've served my 10 or 11 years with the Foundation, which provides scholarships for grad students, internships for the week of the program here. Gives me some good contacts through the international contact board that we have, division board that we have. And so I've taken less of the role in the formal governance of the organization, but still keep in good touch with Phil Harris. He and I both came to the board meeting out in Scottsdale at the same time when we were having some financial issues about publication of Tech Trends. Sharon Smaldino and I both pulled out checkbooks and said, Phil, pay the publisher in Washington, get our journal back out. Phil said, I've never had any board member ever take that kind of action. That built my initial bond with Phil. And he's made me pay back many times over. At auctions, he'll buy a nice Persian carpet from Abbas, one of our strong supporters in the international division, and then call me and say, Charlie, I just spent $600 for you to add something to your home down at the beach. So it's an interesting career that I've had both on the job and now what I can say is in my retirement years. I don't think I'll make another 40 years after my break last year, but I will go to out to Los Angeles or not Las Vegas, our next meeting, and hope that it works well so that I don't make another 30-day trip in Europe at the time that you're having your conference program. I just came from a presentation that was based on our journal Tech Trends in July of this year. They had a panelist group of 6 people from the southern states talking about the impact and the change of the school librarian and the impact of technology using standards, unfortunately, that they were citing from ISTE, the International Society of Technology Education, and from ASL, ALA. I had been on the board of ALA or of ASL prior to being asked to serve as president of AECT. I've had both boards, have good connections. Executive director of ASL is actually a lady that I met as a student in high school. AECT was contributing, working through something called Student Leadership Conference in the summer. We brought high school students in to teach them techniques in video, photography. There was a poet from the Boston area on Black history and poetry that he presented. We had about 10 years that was funded through the foundation, through work with AECT and the New England School Library Association. I had served as president of that regional group. I now serve as a liaison for the program planning for the New England people. Unfortunately, our conference kind of conflicts with other conferences that they tend to have at this time of the year. So there's only a handful of people that might come out of the New England states to present in programs or participate. But I attend their board meeting by phone every year or every month. Call in from Myrtle Beach up to Boston and talk about what's going on within our association. We've had the liaison affiliate connections with the New England states and AECT, I'm going to say back in the 60s. So there has been long history between the regional and the state organizations and AECT.
Stop at that. That's good. In fact, if we have enough time at the end of these other questions, I'd like you to I don't think people always understand that connection between the libraries and AECT. And it might be good to kind of just give a Cliff Note version
It's a
of,
difficult situation with the board discussions right now.
yeah.
There's some discussion about combining based on membership and based on divisional focus of the strategic plan. Some of the board meeting yesterday revolved around organization of AECT and whether we're going to combine divisions, make the board smaller, more receptive to the strategic plan, planning initiatives of the organization. And the school division is one that I think may be looked at as a combination with teacher education and more of the university rather than K-12 focuses. And that's something that policy-wise, I would probably step back at the point that they decide that we're not going to be a strong participant in state standards, national standards, school library standards between the two organizations.
Well, I personally got into the field because I had enjoyed having a minor in library science and was advised,
Same.
broaden your field a little bit and go
Yep.
into media center specialist. And so I think people don't realize that connection.
Yeah, I came into the teaching field as a school librarian with my certificate from the state as a school librarian. There was not a school media specialist certificate in the state of Connecticut until a later point after standards documents came through. Bob Hale had quite a bit to do in the state as far as developing the terminology of the standard, looking at the impact in the school of the technology, the use of video, television, cable access for the high schools. We had something in the state of Connecticut called ITFS. It was Instructional Television Fixed Service, runs through our Connecticut Public Television Service. That was a statewide network that now is more into the digital 4-channel access broadcast capability of CPTV. But yeah, there was a development of going from the school library, ordering of books, magazines, giving instructional lessons on the Dewey system in the elementary schools. Card catalogs are no longer being produced. It's all gone into a digital database. The last of the OCLC cards were printed a week ago, I think. I saw that even that source of printed bibliographic catalog services has gone. The technology area in the school initially was for cataloging, for resource finding the organization. Now it's gone into the internet and access Google searches, databases that are set up for periodical, access. We're not ordering the whole room that was the magazine room. I had a director at one point in my vocational technical schools, came out of Maine. We're not going to be building school libraries with the same type of stack area and book collection. Maine has gone into a new database program, computer program. Apple Computer is putting it in the hands of every one of our students at the high school level. Sylvia Norton, that I had worked with through the New England Association, she was a student at the time that we were involved with the Student Leadership Conference. She's now the executive director of the American Association of School Librarians. Prior to her coming, there was a strong letter that came to AECT's executive director from our predecessor saying, we have the term library. You can't use library in any of your publication documents, new standards documents. That's something that revolves with ASL and and the NK teacher preparation program, we're the ones that handle the school library. So I think the initial reaction was, well, ISTE is looking for a partner to dance with. Robert Harrell had some connections with the executive director, Lynn Swan at ISTE. When I was on the board, there was some discussion about we need to look at the financials and merger opportunities. Standards that were being changed to incorporate the technology into teaching and learning. That's something that has now gone completely between presentations here even on the standards that have been information power being revised, the teacher education standards that come out of ISTE, the library learning standards that come out of ASL. Where's AECT at this point in redeveloping those programs and standards? One of the actions that I spoke out a bit against was the elimination of some of our committees within AECT last December. Standards Committee, Helen Hoffman had served as the chair and was working with university training standards and program standards for technology. After we had broken from ISTE, AECT had developed its own instrument for looking at universities. The program that she chaired, or the committee that she chaired, has done two program reviews. One was her institution, University of Hawaii, and then this past board meeting there was a presentation to accredit the University of North Carolina at Charlotte. That, I think, is at this point the end of our standards development, while some of the other institutions and associations, societies are going ahead at looking at what's needed to develop something for the building level school librarian to say, this is what your national organizations are saying we need to do with collaborative teaching, with the coordination of school direction, some of the planning that goes on with the schools. That's something that Bob Hale, threw at me back 1980s, saying we need someone to work on these vocational schools in your state. They need some technical expertise coming in.
That's so true. That's so true. Well, that kind of works into this other question here. How have your interests and aspirations then changed over time, and especially in consideration of the way in which the field has changed?
Well, I've got two daughters. I have to look at the changes that my children have gone through. I can very vividly recall a dinner meeting where my youngest daughter, who had just gone from junior high into high school, had used Dad's computer to do some PowerPoint presentations for her school board as a talented and gifted junior high school student on research and television viewing. This had to be back in 1980s. And Chrissy went to sign up in the high school for some computer applications courses and was told by the head of the business department that, Microsoft Office and the programs connected, Word, PowerPoint, are something we really don't do until the junior and senior year of your high school year. So there was silence at the dinner table. I said, would you like Dad to go talk with Mrs. Bonacci? And the next morning I got told, don't you dare. So, being the stubborn dad that I am, and the daughter decided to take herself up to her first classroom. Dad came down the next hour or so. At the desk in the main office was Mrs. Bonacci. And I said, my daughter had some interesting points last night. You require keyboarding for the first year or two in the high school. That's part of the business education. I understand the business education. That's part of my requirements with the technical schools in Connecticut. But she's the one who typed her sister's papers for the last 3 years. You remember Heather? Oh, yes. And she did a presentation to your school board that the folks at Southbury with the IBM corporate office had said they had not seen such a good presentation on a PowerPoint presentation by someone of her age. I'd really appreciate if you could talk to my daughter again. I'm working with this computer that the state doesn't provide me. It's her old hand-me-down. Dad's now got computer responsibility for vocational schools with a Dr. Joan Brigham. Joan? Oh, I know Joan very well. She's someone who's president of our business education. She's my assistant superintendent. Oh, I will call Chrissy right down. And she got on the PA and called her out of class. My daughter saw me through the glass window. Yes, you can just imagine what the reaction was. But that's part of where I look back to what has changed in the expectation of teachers for the students who today are the ones that have total control over that learning field. That was not something that was traditional within my education as a school librarian, or as someone who dealt with television and other types of technology in the school. But looking at it now that I've been out 15 years, I recall back, my daughter's now responsible for research in a pharmaceutical company out on the West Coast. It gets flown occasionally down to their corporate headquarters to talk with the vice presidents about her research work. And it was because she came through a biology program at the University of Connecticut, combined it with her computer experience to do those changes in the FDA approval forms of the government. She had merged that traditional biology with the technology expertise of going through high school, college. My older daughter is an engineer. Started out as an electrical engineer. Got a position with electronic assembly work and is now doing circuit board design work and construction for a small engineering company. 2 daughters in the technology area that were not the traditional students and way of going. So if I look back at what my influence as a father or as a person who taught, worked with students in the technology field, lots changed in my perceptions and what we're doing now within this association in a practical way with our school media technology division and the leadership that we have here as people who are in the school libraries. So I'm still very much a part of this organization because of where they have stood in the research and the practice. The journal articles Tech Trends has had over the years, and the people that are presenting in our sessions here.
Excellent, great. So what do you think have been some of the greatest accomplishments of your career so far, and why?
Well, professional career and social career. Professional career, I was asked in my second school position where I saw myself in 5 years. And I said, well, you're asking me at Greenwich High School where I see myself in 5. Well, sure, you have to have some goals besides being here as a school audiovisual department head. I said, well, I've had some very good contacts through the professional associations, both the state level, the regional level, and now starting to hear some things out of the national contacts that I have. I think if I were to look professionally at what the accomplishment, it was moving the school library media programs in the vocational schools into the technology. I had some resistance from librarians who said, you're not taking my IBM Selectric. That's the way I do my cards. I'm not going to deal with a company outside provide me with cards for my catalog. To those who, towards the end of that 20-year period, were technology media specialists, had a computer area, dealt with research online, had access to state databases from the state library. That, over time, was a big change, much because of personalities. If I've had 20 years in this school and you got some new guy coming down trying to tell me what is going to change when we revamp the library here, physically rebuild things in this building, take away my office space maybe because I need to spend more time out in this research and resource information center. A few principals renamed the school library to their information center, looking at the technology direction of the vocational technical schools. I don't know if being a school librarian and handling what I did my first couple of years of reading elementary school story hours and handling the Dewey Decimal System and getting things ordered through BroadArt, and I'm not sure if I said that's all I'm going to do in the next 5 years, that would have been satisfying to me. So I was active with various organizations, both in the library field and with what we call CHETA, which was the Connecticut Higher Education Technology Association. So we were dealing with teacher education preparation that were coming into our schools. I had my last 5 years responsibility for the certification and what we call the BEST program, Beginning Educator Support and Training Program for our new teachers that came into our system, getting their new certification standards, having a video done of their classroom performance, looking in the teacher education standards as to their attitude in the classroom, in addition to their knowledge of the subject level, but classroom management. That was something that was a major change from someone being a classroom school librarian to someone who had responsibility for developing teacher competency for new teachers coming in as shop instructors in some case. I've worked for Dad's company for the last 30 years. I don't know how I'm going to feel comfortable with high school students that have their own perception of how to use a hammer, or what my classroom activity, if they've been working with Dad for the last 4 years as a plumber, and here I am as the shop department head. I have to teach them safety. I have to teach them things like proper use of a ladder. I have to teach them that the automobile now is diagnosed by computer. Changes that Ford is making in some of their training packages that we were getting through our district office for distribution to the auto shops. There was a lot that I learned during that last 20 years.
Would you say it was accurate that you were a change agent in the evolution of not just the school library to the school media center, but also in this whole process of teachers becoming more savvy about technology and using it as a tool for learning?
I think probably people could look at that. I'm not sure if I'm comfortable being the practitioner of taking tags and saying, change agent, yes, there were changes, but it wasn't me so much as some of the student interest in what was going on in our schools. The teachers that were coming in were new and had different ideas of how they were going to manage their classroom. One-on-one instruction, using the computer as a tool that was different than lecturing from the front of the classroom blackboard. The technology changed and was the change issue more than the individual. Yes, I was asked and hired to change what was a very traditional vocational school program with, I think they had 46 trade areas, and to have some of those shop instructors realize teaching tools, techniques, safety videos, things that were coming into the training field for education.
You definitely facilitated the change.
Yes.
That's awesome.
Yes, I would say that.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, how do you want to be remembered within the profession?
A worker, someone that was not afraid of, as Phil found, the database that we got from Washington, D.C. when we left our offices there needed a lot of cleaning up. I spent 10 years as the membership chair working with our database renewals of membership, changes in professional positions. I had a note from one of the presenters this afternoon who said, "Charlie, you seem to have some pull. I need to change the email and the institution I'm working for to the University of West Georgia. And can you get that changed on the program and on the email and on the outline in the program?" I sent an email off to Larry. He responded the next day, "It's changed." Worker, there are problems and projects and things that I have listened to. There's some discussion now in this board meeting at the conference here, organizational change. And as the foundation members sat 2 hours ago upstairs, you know, Sharon Smaldino said, we've done this. We've been through this discussion. We've got organization pieces that we've changed and others that we knew weren't going to help the organization. But we're going to discuss it again on Saturday at the board meeting. I am at the point of saying the policy that's being set by the executive board is something that that's their job. They tell me that there's something that has changed in the strategic planning, that they can use me as someone who can sit at home, do some database work, change the handbook document that I kept pointing to the last 2 years, saying here's committee assignments, here's the committee charge that should be handed out to each of the committee members. Committee responsibilities got cut this year. 10 committees relieved. I looked at that as a major issue because I used our interns and our new members and our GSA members to come into the committee meeting for membership of ASL, of AECT. Excuse me, edit that. But the AECT membership committee was the group where we took ideas from our new members, our graduate students. I'm not sure that we're going to get that same input through the new strategic planning document that is now part of the planning role of the association. I go to every board meeting. I listen. I don't speak often publicly in the meeting. I'm more likely to put an email out to executive committee member, to Phil, to the incoming president, and saying, here's just one opinion. Past president's luncheon that we have on Friday each year, there's about a dozen past officers of the organization. And we talk about things that we see as changes within the policy and the direction of AECT. We don't have a formal council role right now of giving a voice to the board of our meetings and our procedures, but that's something that we may have some way of getting back into that structure of the board policy decisions as part of the strategic plan. Foundation's dealing with the same thing. They're not a formal group recognized except by a member of the foundation at the board meeting and a board member who sits at our foundation meetings. Communication back and forth, reports of what's been discussed. But outside of funding of the interns, I'm not sure that AECT and ECT have defined what their formal financial responsibilities are to each other. We have supported AECT at one point when the finances of the organization were struggling. That has been repaid on an annual basis by Phil, so that debt was something that we supported AECT out of the foundation. I suspect as other members of the foundation talk about their role, mine's gone 10 years. I'm glad to be given some recognition on Friday as an emeritus member of the foundation. There will be 5 that will be given that role with the foundation board. Basically, it means that we can still attend and participate in the foundation. We don't vote, and that's fine. I think after 10 years, you need someone else come up with the fiscal issues, get the fundraising, the endowment issues settled, and that's not a strength that I've had. So I can step back and say, let the other Rotarians deal with that. Let the other members of the church foundation or support groups come in and talk about that. So I'm transitioning off foundation board, enjoying much more of my cruise time when I get out to the boat, see other, or ship rather, and see other ports of call. Have spent the last 2 years now traveling through Europe, the Holy Land. The one drawback, I think, was I missed some of the connections that I had with the professional opportunities of visiting China and Seoul, Korea, who have delegations here at our conference. And I said, oh, Mr. White, Dr. White. And I said, no, doctor. Never went that far as a practitioner. A PhD was not something that the vocational schools were looking for me to spend another 7 years or whatever in doing research work on that. Practitioner. I'm more the worker. That's how I'd like to be remembered.
So I want to end with, what are your favorite AECT memories and any good stories that you'd like to leave us with?
Well, favorite AECT memory has to go back to my first AECT conference. It was like a second honeymoon for my wife and I, and it was the convention conference that Bob Hale was chairing, and they had a keynote speaker by the name of Ted Turner. And at the time, he brought a very nice blonde secretarial assistant with him that raised quite a bit of interest from people on the foundation board because of some of the language that was used in the presentation. And that didn't mean too much to me until I was asked to go out to the Montana Association a number of years after. And I sat with the president of the Montana affiliate at a meeting and then went out to lunch, or dinner actually. And the restaurant got very quiet. And I said, what's going on? She says, don't make a big scene, but just turn and look over your left shoulder. Well, I don't recognize who the old guy is, but the lady with the green fringe jacket is Jane Fonda. Ted and Jane are in town. And when I went back to the restaurant for a drink after dinner, the president of the association, tell the bartender who you just had dinner with. And he immediately stopped and says, Ted and Jane are back in at their ranch. We can tell you the story about Ted and Jane. I said, no, I've already heard from our organization, from AECT, the story of Ted Turner. Learn from keynote presentations. Stories. I guess some of the good memories are people like Robert Harrell. Dr. Harrell was out of Georgia, and he was a good mentor. Addie Kissinger, no question. She was the one who gave me a pin one year and said, what are you going to do as a leader? She wanted every new member of the organization to say what you're going to do in AECT to show your leadership. Got me involved in the leadership committee of AECT. We did the first timers orientation year after year. So it got me to meet the new ones coming up the field. It's the family It's the group and the context that you meet. It's the new lady who showed last night. After her full day of workshop, she wanted a glass of wine at the bar. Hans, Wes, and I were sitting at one of the tables. Come, sit with us. I said, how are things going? Did you go to the meeting today? And she said, I was doing a workshop, with a British accent. And Wes said, I think she's one of the keynoters here. It's that informal meeting and contact time and answering questions for people that are new to the association that I think is something that I've remembered and I've enjoyed. And the auctions. I was an auctioneer for the last 10 years with the ECT Foundation. I've gone to the international auction any number of years. As I say, Bob calls me and says, I've got a carpet for you from Dr. Abbas. Just write the check out to the international group. I've just enjoyed participating in that informal structure of AECT. I'm not one for the politics and the drama that goes on at the board.
That's great. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.